To the surprise of many people, Batman Arkham Asylum was a big commercial and critical success. Now, of course, whenever a game is successful, the publishers want to expand upon the material. And by expand, I mean make a shit ton of money off it. So of course, Arkham Asylum would get a sequel. The interesting part is that Rocksteady thought about making a sequel 7 months before Arkham Asylum released, and there was even an Easter egg in Arkham Asylum that foreshadowed the events in the next game. 2 years later, in 2011, Batman Arkham City released to even more critical and commercial acclaim than the first game, becoming one of the fastest selling games of that year. In fact, the game sold over 12.5 million copies in its first year of release and generated over $600 million. The game won multiple Game of the Year awards and is considered one of the best games of the 7th generation of gaming. So to say that this game was a success is putting it lightly. But it's been almost a decade since Arkham City released. So, how does the game hold up nowadays? Gameplay-wise, Arkham City is an improvement over the previous game. My main complaint with the previous game was that the combat was overly simplistic, really requiring you to only press 2 buttons to get past most encounters. You press 1 button to attack and then 1 to counter. The general mechanics have stayed the same, although Batman can now counter 3 enemies at once. You also get access to most of your gadgets from Arkham Asylum right at the start of the game. One problem that was fixed was the gadget variety. In Arkham Asylum, half the gadgets were batarangs, whereas in City, there is much more gadget variety. The upgrade system also has much more variety, allowing you to choose much more moves in combat. There is also a bigger variety of enemies that require different gadgets or different combos to take down, so you're not just pressing the same 2 buttons constantly to win encounters. While this is an improvement, it isn't by much. All this does is add extra combinations of buttons on top of the buttons you're already pushing. So whenever shield guys or armor guys or stun baton guys appear, you just do the same combinations to them every time to knock down the defenses. So it doesn't add much to the combat, and it doesn't take much skill either. You just press the quickfire gadget button, or just press BAA or AAX to knock down the defenses. There are other ways to knock down the defenses, with super strikes from gadgets, which are pretty easy to spam, considering you only need 8 hits to activate them, and you can upgrade it to 5 hits. And these superpower attacks overpower all enemy defenses, and either stun a group of enemies, allowing you time to attack, knock out enemies on the ground, or hit a group of surrounding enemies in one attack. So getting high combo scores is really easy, and taking out enemies is really easy. And you're also invincible when these animations play, so the only thing you need to keep an eye on is the counter icon. So really the only skill factor in this game is reaction time. There really isn't any skill ceiling or progression worth striving towards. If I can just spam the same attacks constantly and get through the game just fine and get rewarded for it, that's not very good game design. In a game like Path of Neo, you can't just spam the same combos constantly because they take a lot of focus meter to use, and also enemies can counter or block your attacks if you spam them, meaning that you have to switch up how you fight them. Why bother trying to learn the combat mechanics when I can just spam the same attacks and get 3 stars on challenge maps? I mean, if you want to get your name high on the leaderboard, then there's that, but otherwise there is really no reason to do anything beyond just spam the same attack again and again and again. They have added some new gadgets and some more quickfire gadget buttons so you can use the gadgets mid-combat, and they all act and behave in different ways and add more variety to the combat. But at the same time, it still doesn't fix the issue that you can just spam attacks and get through encounters, and you get rewarded for it with huge amounts of XP because the game thinks that if you can get high combo scores, then you're a glowing brain god, even though it's really easy to do. I don't really care enough to talk about any of the other stuff added to the combat because there really isn't much point. None of them fix or change the gameplay in any way, and you can still just spam the same attacks to get high points. So is it even worth mentioning them? It won't change the conclusion that the combat's kinda shite. In terms of stealth, it has also been improved. Enemies now have more gadgets to combat you, but you also have more to combat them. Although the stealth is way too easy in this game. Most stealth areas in the game have ledges where you can backclaw people off, and there will always be a good few guys on ledges, so you can instantly take out like half the room this way. You also now have a smoke bomb, which allows Batman to completely disappear if spotted, but you can also use it to take out a group of enemies while blinded. You can only use it once indoors, but even if you do get spotted, you can just grapple up to the nearest gargoyle and then swing around like Spider-Man until they stop you. Later in the game, they use detective mode disruptors, but these are really easy to spot and take out, so it doesn't really add much challenge to the game. And if we want to talk about later game elements, let's talk about the Disruptor. This thing is overpowered. You can jam guns and set off mines with it. You can only do 2 at once, but 2 is still enough to make each stealth encounter negligent. They have thermal goggles now, but you can just jump around to another gargoyle while they scan that one and then jump back once they're done. So what kind of challenge does it add? My main issue isn't the mechanics themselves, it's that they don't work altogether that well. I get that being Batman is meant to be a power fantasy, but power fantasies shouldn't just be given to the player, they have to earn it. And that's why I don't find the combat or stealth in this game that much fun, because I never have to work for anything. Bearing in mind that I played on hard mode and never once died in my playthrough. If I was playing on easy and normal, I could forgive the lack of difficulty, but hard mode is meant to be hard. Yet I was never challenged at any point in this game, because the only challenge in this game is reaction time. So yeah, the gameplay is boring and requires no skill. In terms of other gameplay aspects, there are alternate characters to play, such as Catwoman, Robin and Nightwing, with different outfits, but they don't play all that much differently from Batman, and mostly feel like a Diet Coke versions of him, so they don't add much variety. There are side missions, but most of these just consist of you going to a location and then scanning something, and then Batman and Alfred talk about the side mission, rinse and repeat. The only ones that don't do this are the Riddler ones, where you have to go all around the city solving stupid-ass puzzles to then go to the next location of the next hostage, where you then go for a gauntlet to get to the hostage. You do this again and again and again until you finally catch the Riddler, and it doesn't even feel all that satisfying. Zsasz just has you travel around the city looking for a payphone before then finding his location. The rest of the side missions just have you go to a location, fight a few guys, and then that's it. The side missions are all the same and not very fun. Riddler's Revenge is boring because you basically just play combat and stealth sections trying to earn certain objectives or get high scores, which isn't hard. Okay, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, I don't like this game very much. Combat and stealth lack variety and skill, and the side missions are all the same and uninteresting. Gameplay-wise, there is nothing great about this game. There's nothing terrible, but this game doesn't do anything spectacular. Especially the boss fights. They suck. Solomon Grundy has you plant explosives whilst dodging his easily dodgeable attacks. Ra's al Ghul just has you mash buttons or spam attacks. With Mr. Freeze, you can just spam him with different attacks until he's beaten. And Clayface, you can just mash grenades until he freezes. None of them require any skill or force you to use any strategy. You just spam the intended way to beat the boss until they're beaten. I don't know why Mr. Freeze is considered one of the best boss fights in gaming when Metal Gear Solid did stealth boss fights much better. Like, look at the Fury from Metal Gear Solid 3. There's so many different ways you can fight that boss, and it's actually challenging to fight him and figure out where he's going and what he's going to do next. Whereas with Mr. Freeze, you can just go spam the same attacks. Like I said. I'm genuinely surprised that Arkham City is considered one of the best video games ever made when plenty of games have done everything it does better. Games like God Hand and Path of Neo did combat better than this game, and games such as Metal Gear Solid and Splinter Cell did stealth much better than this game. Combat-wise, enemies in God Hand or Path of Neo offer far more variety than any enemies in this game, forcing you to completely change the way you approach them and the combat encounter entirely. The boss fights in those games are amazing as well, because the enemy has plenty of ways to attack you, but you have even more ways to fight back. Fights in God Hand or Path of Neo can be fun at any level of play. If you're someone playing the game for the first time, then you can have fun trying to figure out how the enemy works to give pulse-pounding action. If you're a high-level player, then you can turn the enemies into punching bags to pull off some really cool combos, and boss fights become more of a dance where you figure out your own rhythm and defeat the boss with it. With Arkham City, you can't experiment because the game wants you to play it the way it was designed. Stealth games like Metal Gear or Splinter Cell are still replayed to this day because of the skill ceiling with those games. If you become good enough at those games, you can become a ghost, a phantom, and the way you use the tools at your disposal can completely change the game. There are countless videos of people doing really creative stuff in Metal Gear or Splinter Cell because of how much depth those games offer, and they all have depth whilst being inviting to newcomers. Arkham City only really works for a first time playthrough, because on a second time playthrough, you'll see just how restrictive the game is, and that you can't be that creative at all. I don't get why Arkham City gets the praise it does, considering that every element of this game was done better by other games that released before it. Arkham City is a jack of all trades, master of none. It has a lot of mechanics, but none of them are fleshed out enough to make the core gameplay loop interesting or engaging. If you want a game that has amazing combat that encourages variety and skill or progression with the player, go play God Hand or Path of Neo. If you want a stealth game with countless options on how to handle encounters, go play Metal Gear Solid or Splinter Cell. If you want a good superhero game, go play Spider-Man Web of Shadows. Anyway, my point is that Arkham City is a mediocre game and it does nothing spectacular. But there is a story in this game, and the game is known for having an amazing story. But I don't think it's amazing. The story in this game legit makes no sense whatsoever, and kind of sucks. Protocol 10 involves sectioning off a part of Gotham City to create Arkham City, where a bunch of criminals are gathered up and then killed in the super prison. Why? Why would the government section off a part of Gotham when they can use it for more beneficial means, even if only for financial means? Why also go to the effort of building this place to kill criminals when you can just kill the criminals already? Are the prisons in Gotham like Blackgate and Arkham overpopulated? I guess that would make sense, but why not just build another prison? It's more dangerous to turn a city into a prison. Hugo Strange also says that he needed Batman for Protocol 10 to happen.
Capturing Bruce Wayne is so much easier than Batman. And now that we have you, Protocol 10 is ready to begin.
Why? Protocol 10 involves killing criminals in Arkham City. Why would Batman be needed to do that? If anything, having Batman in Arkham City increases the chances of your plan failing. It's the same mistake Joker made in Arkham Asylum, where he trapped the only man who could stop him in the same building. Only this time, Hugo Strange is supposed to be smarter. Also, Hugo Strange is a shit villain. Him knowing Batman's identity goes nowhere and is never important to the plot. In fact, he's so forgettable that the game needs to constantly remind you that Protocol 10 will commence in 10 hours.
Protocol 10 will commence in 10 hours. Protocol 10 will commence in 9 hours. Protocol 10 will commence in 7 hours. Protocol 10 will commence in 5 hours. Protocol 10 will commence in 4 hours. Protocol 10 will commence in 2 hours. Protocol 10 will commence in 1 hour. Protocol 10 will commence in 10 minutes.
If you need to constantly remind the player what the point of the game is and the main plot point, then you've messed up at storytelling. The only interesting part with Strange is at the end of the game when he dies. Batman being poisoned by the Joker doesn't work as a plotline because of the open-world nature of the game. The narrative constantly reinforces that Batman will die in a matter of hours if he doesn't get a cure, yet you can spend hours of the game doing side missions and Batman's health doesn't deteriorate in any way. There is only one section of the game where Batman's health is ever taken into account, and even then it's over really quick when he drinks a chalice that heals him for a few more hours. The poison plotline doesn't add tension to the story, and if anything, takes away tension. It breaks the illusion of you being a part of the game's world. Instead, you are the world and the story will only progress when you want it to. The Ra's al Ghul plotline also sucks because it's tied into the two previous ones. It's still the most interesting part of the game, but it doesn't work because it requires the two legs of the other plotlines in the game to stand on, and those plotlines suck, therefore it falls apart. But there is not much to this plotline itself either. Ra's went to Hugo Strange for Batman's identity, even though he already has a daughter who knows Batman's identity, so it doesn't even make much sense for him to be involved in this story, and every scene with him is just, haha Batman, I will wipe the slate clean. The Clayface reveal adds nothing to the game but shock value. Replace every scene involving Clayface Joker with the real Joker, and nothing changes. The only thing missing would be the final boss fight. Mr. Freeze had the potential to be the most interesting. He and Batman have been rivals for years now, and they finally have achieved common ground. Batman gives Freeze Penguin, who took everything from him, and he agrees to help Batman. This is an interesting relationship, but the game just decides to ignore it and then have Freeze start attacking Batman out of nowhere and destroys one of the cures, telling Batman that he needs to save his wife Nora. Freeze? Batman's dying, and he needs the cure. And, according to this game's story, he has hours left at best. How do you expect him to find your wife if he's dead? What reason is there for you to destroy the cure? Oh, so we can have a shit boss fight. That's not to say the entire story sucks. The interactions between the characters is entertaining a lot of the time. I mean, this is Paul Dini's writing, and he knows these characters too well for them to be boring. The scenes with Batman and the Joker are some of the highlights of the game.
I killed your girlfriend, poisoned Gotham in hell. It's not even breakfast. But so what? We all know you'll save me.
Every decision you've ever made ends with death and misery. People die. I stop you. You'll just break out and do it again.
Think of it as a running gag. No! Are you happy now?
Do you want to know something funny? Even after everything you've done, I would have saved you.
That actually is pretty funny.
Not so funny now, is it? Funny man.
But other than that, this story really has nothing going for it. None of the plot lines make any sense or are very engaging. Characters make out-of-character choices for the sake of the plot and gameplay, and the plot twists add nothing but shock value. I don't get it. People say this game has one of the best stories in gaming. I don't see it. In conclusion, Arkham City is a mediocre game with decent gameplay and a poorly written story. The game isn't bad by any means, but it does nothing spectacular. Despite this, the game got overwhelming acclaim and the series continued with Arkham Origins and Arkham Knight. Maybe I'll talk about those games at some point. They aren't much better than this game, to be honest. Either way, unless you're a die-hard fan of Batman, there are other games that are worth your time.